Hello, everybody, and welcome to September's webinar. Today, we're joined by Ivan Holloway, and he's from Vetlife, and he's here to talk to us about mating preparation. So I'll hand it over to you, Ivan.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thanks for taking the time to hear about what I've got to say regarding preparing for mating 2020. I guess if we start into it, there are some key points, and initially, and that's that matching feed supply with herd demand is obviously a major driver of production and income, and clearly appropriately timed calving is a huge influencer of this. And of course, always late calving cows consistently struggle to get back in calf. So when planning for mating, we need to sort out an appropriate, mating has to relate to an appropriate calving time to match that feed supply and demand. And secondly, we want to achieve a tight calving to avoid those late calvers, because again, those girls are the girls that have trouble getting back in calf and contribute too greatly to our overall empty rate. Some facts in stone are that our body condition score at calving should be on average 5 for cows and 5.5 for heifers. Yeah, I know we're past that date, but it's important to acknowledge it because that relates to what they were dried off at and the ability to put condition on over the winter. And obviously, planning for that began last autumn. So the question remains, have you achieved that? It's too late now, but if you haven't achieved it, you need to bank it for next year and be thinking forward to what happens at the end of lactation, this season or next year, to get it right for the following mating. And clearly we aim to minimise body condition score loss post-calving. We know that cows losing one body condition score or less get back in calf earlier than cows that lose more than a body condition score. And that's simply a response to that they will cycle earlier. And the earlier they cycle, again, more chances to get back in calf. So what you can do, it's essential that we have strict feed budgeting to identify early any deficits or surpluses in the system, and so that you can respond to them. Weekly walks are essential to assess that changing pasture cover and feed wedge. We want to respond to pasture deficits quickly, obviously, with supplements and or nitrogen, or alter the rotation lengths to suit. And we know that nitrogen is frowned upon a bit, overuse these days, so other products are available to us. So once warm enough, things like gibberellic acid may be useful. It actually can give a faster response to nitrogen. And again, the science shows that it doesn't impinge on feed quality further down the track. So there are options for you. Always consider preferentially managing those younger cows, lighter cows, sick cows. But if you're gonna do that, you've got to do it early. And again, research suggests that preferential groups can be very helpful, but you need to do it early. If you leave it too late, there isn't enough time for groups to interact, and social disruption may even make things worse. What you can do and should be doing now is ensuring that trace elements are up to the mark. So get those pre-mate checks early, i.e. right now, to give cows time to have deficits corrected. It's no good a week out of the planned start of mating finding that copper is low. It's too late to rectify. But copper, selenium, B12, magnesium, calcium, and iodine are all important for conception rates and yet commonly deficient. So again, act now and get those pre-mating checks done. Check that whatever brew you've got going into your cows is having the desired effect. If it's good, all good, but monitoring is the key to success. You only need around 8 to 10 cows blood tested, and that can give you plenty of good information. Similarly, regular ketone checks can alert you to subclinical ketosis and that continual burning of stored fats from those girls related to energy deficits going on. Again, simple, 8 to 10 cows can give you good herd information. And the technology's out there that you can do it, pretty much do it yourself, or get your trained animal health professional to do it. But it's a very simple little check to let you know what herds are doing and how you're recovering in terms of those negative energy deficits at the beginning of calving. Again, what you can do now is, and should have been doing, is treating those dirty cows regularly. Ideally, you'd have been metro checking and treating cows in 2-week batches after calving. And then you also need to recheck cows that have been treated to ensure that they've cleared okay. But along with metro checking, be aware of the shortfalls. We often overdiagnose, and we may still miss some. It's not a perfect world, but it's still a very good tool in the current situation available to us. And we know that chronic endometriosis in cows will lead to poorer conception rates at the start of mating. But there are other techniques available to you. For instance, ultrasounding of the uterus. It does have a tendency to underdiagnose dirty cows. So on the face of it, you may treat less. Some may like that because it will save money, but the end outcome may not be as good. If you're actually missing dirty cows, is it as good a process? So I guess it's variable, and it really does depend on the skill of the operator. So if you come across it, you know, just judge it on its merits and ask questions. What you can do now is get heat detection aids sorted. What will you use? We've got K-Mars, checkmates, scratchies, tail paint, collars, pedometers. There's a whole range of good heat detection aids out there. But I think it's important to remember that these are heat detection aids, and they're not the be-all and end-all. They don't mean you can ignore looking at cows. You know, watching cows and recording heats in the paddock is still really important. Don't just rely on detecting heats in the cow shed. Similarly, prior to mating, review the heat detection skills amongst your staff. I mean, you may well have new staff, you may have experienced staff, but review that everyone's up to scratch, and determine which aids you'll use. Formulate a plan and decide how you're going to record these cows on heat, and ensure that all staff are trained to do this. It may mean that you've got a champion in the team that will take over this, but ensure that everyone is on the same page. And then when mating begins, you know, monitor those submission rates. Ideally, you need to be doing it weekly. Don't wait for 3 weeks to see how your submission rates are gone, because if you've got high non-return rates, be very wary of them, because not all of those girls will be pregnant. What do high non-return rates mean? You've either got a really good success rate, or maybe the staff have gone to sleep. But use those tools that are there available for you. Non-cyclers, and they're an age-old problem, aren't they? You need to know who they are. You know, there are two approaches. One is put your head in the sand and not worry about them, but I think you do that to your peril. Again, you need to know who they are. So ideally, you'll be tail painting cows 5 weeks from the planned start of mating and recording those heats that you see as they go, so that then when you get to the planned start of mating or before the planned start of mating, you can make an informed decision on what you want to do. And if you've only got a handful of cows, yeah, sure, you might want to leave them to come on their own. But if you've got a higher proportion of cows, it's better to enroll them in an appropriate program ideally at planned start of mating minus 10 days, so that they're all put up on day 1 for AI. Yes, you'll treat more cows, but those girls often won't have great fertile heats, and they need progesterone priming. So again, using the appropriate device that you like, so a Q-mate, a cedar, a DIB, whatever. But beware of the limitations of non-cycling cow programs and what you're actually trying to achieve. The goal is kickstarting these girls cycling and getting a fair percentage pregnant on day 1. But remembering that a cow being mated on her first heat, whether that be an artificially stimulated heat via a non-cycling program or her first natural heat, the average conception rate's only around 50%. So you're not going to get them all pregnant. And remember what we're trying to do. We're trying to get a compact calving next year, which means more days in milk, and obviously more dollars. This graph is what's called a survival curve, and it's two different herds, where one, the top graph, if you like, curve, is cows that are left to come on heat on their own, and the bottom curve is a herd where the cows have been synchronized to a degree up front, and you can see the gap between them. What that gap is showing is that on day one, those girls that have been synchronized early have more days in milk. That's what a non-cycler program is going to do. But again, by using a non-cycler program, it's important to remember that you're probably not going to affect your end pregnancy rate, because those two lines, as you see, tend to converge at the end. So a lot of people get disappointed with non-cycling programs because they still end up with a 15% empty at the end of the year, and they got 15% empty the year before when they may have not used the non-cycler program. But what you are getting is cows calving earlier, a tighter calving pattern next season. That tighter calving pattern may mean that cows are cycling earlier, and it may actually have an impact the following season on your overall empty rate. Plus, you're going to get more AB heifers, and again, more days in milk. It's important to remember that treating non-cyclers is a case of a diminishing rate of return, and that you can wait and treat cows later, but the later you treat them, the less, if you like, payback there is on the system, and it gets to a point where it's just costing you money and it's not actually improving the end result. Again, think about what we're trying to do. We're trying to kick-start cows that are not cycling to give them more chances to conceive, to get more AB calves, and to get more days in milk. And remembering again, that most infertile heat of a cow is her first heat. So the second and subsequent heats in a season are generally more fertile. The uterus has had more time to involate. You've got a better environment for implantation following conception. There are always exceptions. But so again, the earlier we get cows cycling, the better chance we have to get good conceptions. But it is important to remember it is an extremely complex process. Success depends on a truckload of factors. We've touched on endometritis, so treating those dirty cows regularly. Days calved, so again, a compressed calving pattern next season will mean cows have got longer time to recover and cycle before planned starter mating. The age of the cows will have an effect. We talked about body condition score at calving. You know, that's going to impact on your decisions at drying off. The body condition score loss of cows, that you know, we want to reduce that and feed accordingly and match our demand to try and reduce that body condition score loss. AI technique will have an effect, and of course the energy balance of feeds has a huge effect. All of those factors combined to get a successful conception and implantation, which means a final pregnancy. We've got other tools at our disposal, and prostaglandin and Y-weight programs are very good tools. And again, it's important to understand it may not have an impact on the final pregnancy rate, but it will bring cows forward to gain more days in milk. And it brings home that importance of doing those pre-mating heats because it'll only work on cycling cows. What it involves is having those pre-mating heats recorded, and then you can take those girls that cycle 7 to 14 days before the planned starter mating and inject them with prostaglandin at the planned starter mating, so that you don't have to wait another 7 to 14 cows for them, days for them to come in naturally. Hence the name, why wait? Why wait for those good girls in week 2 and 3 or whatever, when you can actually put them up front? And again, it's a relatively cheap and simple way of compressing calving and getting more days in milk next season. There are other things you can do. You can palpate ovaries, you can scan ovaries, but just be a little aware of operator fatigue. They're actually difficult things to do. And often the returns don't outweigh the costs. So it's often not financially viable, and it can depend on the skill of the operator. However, if you go down that path and you find a whole lot of cows that actually have got CLs in them, and so they're not true anestrus non-cyclic cows, it actually may point out that your heat detection isn't that great and it's been less than adequate. Still going in and using progesterone priming in those girls is probably the best option. What about once a day milking? It does work, but it's important to acknowledge that it's probably limited benefit in five, from probably now on, in that 5 weeks prior to the planned start of mating. Research shows that once a day milking from 4 weeks from planned start of mating -7, which is 5 weeks before planned start of mating, until 3 weeks into mating, had no improvement in overall conception rate and only a small 11% improvement in submission rates. In that situation, the milk production loss did not cover the response. I'm not saying don't do once a day milking, but the important concept is that once a day milking from earlier on is more likely to gain a better response. So again, you got to make that decision early in the season post-calving. So it's possibly a decision for early next season, particularly for those lower than ideal body conditions score cows. It's an overall farm's decision. It's getting too late probably this year to make that decision now, I think. What about teaser bulls? It's reasonably well established that there isn't a ram effect approach with bulls and cows. And if you're not familiar with that, sheep are short day breeders, and rams that colour up and get smelly, being run alongside ewes or amongst ewes will cause ewes to cycle a bit early. That effect doesn't really happen in cattle because cattle aren't short day breeders or seasonal breeders. They're seasonally polyestrous. They have heats all year round, and you put a bull with a cow at any time and they will be able to get them pregnant. However, I'm not saying that teaser bulls aren't useful. They can be very useful, because what a teaser bull will do is they're very good at as a heat detection aid in picking cows that perhaps you aren't so good at picking. So if your stats indicate that there might be a heat detection issue on your farms, then teaser bulls could well be a good tool, because they are very good at picking out cows that are having heats, and maybe not strong heats, but they'll be still out there sniffing around and riding cows. And what about bulls themselves? Will you or won't you? There are always biosecurity considerations around bulls, and you need to take that into consideration greatly, because whenever you bring bulls in, you risk bringing disease in. So knowing the status of those bulls and where they come from is really important. Obviously, Mycoplasma bovis comes to the forefront in a lot of people's minds. You need to know the health status of those bulls. They need to be blood tested, okay? They should be negative for BVD. That's a PCR negative, and maybe IBR as well. But what is essential is that they need to be vaccinated. They need to be vaccinated for BVD, IBR, lepto, and probably clostridial disease. With shorter mating intervals, bulls may only get one shot at the cows. So they need to be in the best condition. And always purchase bulls from a reputable source, a source that you can believe have done what they've said they're going to do, that they've vaccinated these bulls, that they've tested these bulls, that they're definitely negative for BVD, that there aren't any other risks associated. Again, planning for bulls, you need to do it reasonably early. They need to arrive on farm several weeks before they're actually ready to be used. That gives them time to settle down and gives opportunities to discover any issues that may occur. You may find out that one or two of the bulls are a little bit dirty and not really trustworthy, and you might want to move them on. But again, getting them the day before they due to go out or a few days before they go out doesn't give you any time to plan for those issues. You need a number of bulls. Lame bulls won't work hard, okay? Sick bulls with increased temperatures, they'll have depressed sperm production, and it can take 60 days for sperm production to pick up again. By that time, bull mating might be over. So you need to replace unwell bulls quickly. How many bulls might you need? We used to run on a sort of rough cigarette packet 1 to 50, but in reality, that probably overestimates the amount of bulls that are needed. And Dairy NZ have a very good graph on their website where the amount of bulls that you need actually will vary depending obviously on the size of your herd, but also on the amount of cows that are still open when the bulls go out that aren't mated. So having a good handle on your 6-week and calf rate from previous seasons, you'll have a fair idea how many cows you think are probably still left to be mated. And that will depend on how many bulls you need out in the herd. Remembering that the total number of bulls you want out in the herd, you need the same amount of bulls in reserve to be able to be rotated around to keep those bulls fresh. You should always have 2 teams of bulls. Bull mating, often it's let the bulls go and they'll get the cows and we tend to forget about them. But they've got a really important job. You need to regularly rotate those bull teams and keep them fresh and keen. Yeah, they're a pain. They fight, they dig holes, they wreck fences, but they've got an extremely important job chasing probably the less fertile animals in the herd. So don't underestimate the importance of those bulls and what they will do. I've come to the end really, and I've probably rushed through a bit quicker than I intended, but there are 2 main take-home messages from what I'm talking about and preparing for mating this year. From this point on, control what you can control this year. That is, get your non-cyclers under control. Know what you've got and what you're dealing with so you can make good decisions. Ensure that your heat detection is up to scratch. You've got a plan in how you're going to do that. Ensure your trace elements are up to scratch, that you've got time to correct any deficits that might be in your system. Ensure your bull team is ready and rearing to go, and you aren't going to have a shortfall with the number of bulls and the health of those bulls when you run into problems there. And then look at the issues that you can't fix this year. You know, look back and go, yeah, cows got to calving a bit light or whatever. Those, body condition score, they're too late to fix. So make sure you make a note of it. As I said, bank it and be ready to fix that next season by planning forward to how you dry off cows in the autumn. And similarly with late calvers. You got too many late calvers this year, you may not have time to do much about that. But how you treat your non-cyclers this year and compress your calving for next year will solve those late calvers for next season. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Oh, that was great, Ivan. It's nice to keep it short when farmers are just watching during their lunch break.
I'm sorry if it was too short.
No, it's good. Yeah, we want to keep it under half an hour. So yeah, right on target. But yeah, no questions have come through. So I think we'll wrap it up. Thanks very much for participating. And yeah, thank you again.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
See ya.
Cheers. Bye.